everyone, it's Tanya, and today I'm doing my very long overdue July wrap-up. It's also my 50th video on YouTube, so yay me! Not really that big a deal, but thought I'd let you know. So, that's that for the intro. We're gonna dig right in, because I read a lot of books in July. I'm very proud of myself. I actually read a lot of books this month on audiobook, which is why I read so many instead of, wasting time. I was able to multitask. I was playing the audiobooks while I was cleaning the kitchen, while I was driving, while I was just, staring at my ceiling, and I think that kind of helped optimize my time reading, which was great. So, audiobooking is now my new favorite thing. I found this app called Overdrive. My friend Delphina told me about it. I'll link her channel down below, and you can hook up your local library's card to the app and check out ebooks and audiobooks on there, which is fantastic because audiobooks tend to cost like $30 to $40 if it's a good book. So this was just a blessing in disguise. I really, really enjoyed audiobooking all of that month, and I'm still doing it right now. So the first book that I read in July was Tosh Hearts Tolstoy by Catherine Ormsby. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because it was a fantastic book. So, Tosh Hearts Tolstoy is about a girl named Tosh who is working on a YouTube adaptation of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina with her best friend and a couple other people who she's cast and who are helping. And their YouTube series blows up after a famous YouTuber gives them a great review. So this book follows Tosh as she and her friends battle the positives and negatives of going viral, and things proceed from there. Our main character Tosh is also asexual, so we have that aspect of her life playing into the narrative. Overall, it's a fantastic novel. It was great to see some very well done asexual representation, at least in my experience and in my opinion. I thought it was very true to how it feels, and just an overall extremely heartwarming and genuine story. I love the aspect of YouTube playing into the story. It's a very millennial aspect. Most books tend to focus on texting and IM, email, chat. We document, film, and talk at inanimate objects, and that really kind of came into the story really nicely. The internet and the communicative aspects of the digital era just flowed very naturally with the story, and I really enjoyed it. So the next book that I read in July was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sáenz. I still cannot pronounce his last name. I have asked a lot of people. They've all told me how to pronounce it correctly. I just cannot remember, and that is all on me. I low-key hate myself. I promise I'll work on that though. So I gave Aristotle and Dante a 5 out of 5 as well. Literally every chapter in this book had me crying. Every single chapter, by the last line, I was in tears. Fantastic novel. So this book is about a young boy named Aristotle who has a lot of anger issues, pent-up aggression, and just has an overall dark outlook on his life. And this is at the age of, I think, like 10 or 11, pretty young. And we follow him through his life as he meets this boy named Dante, who is very happy-go-lucky and, in all senses of the word, the complete polar opposite of Aristotle. The book follows their journey to becoming close friends and more, and focuses on their lives and how they intertwine, and it's just a very, very beautiful story. Both our main characters are, I think, Mexican. I could be wrong. It plays a huge role in his character development. It was just a beautiful novel. Very, very important, I think, for the cultural aspect of the story. Again, I can't speak to it. I'm Indian, I'm not Hispanic. Fantastic, fantastic read, and I really enjoyed it. So this is me back after charging my battery, taking a shower, combing my hair, and having dinner. Excuse the pajama shirt. So the next book that I read in July was The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This book, it's a detective mystery series following our main character named Cormoran Strike. He is a private detective who gets hired to investigate the alleged suicide of a high-profile model named Lula Landry, and he is hired by her adoptive brother. It follows the typical plot of a murder mystery. It wasn't the most interesting of mysteries. It follows a very typical mystery plot line of, you know, the whodunit, several suspects get questioned, blah blah, so on and so forth. But it was captivating nonetheless. I really enjoyed the story. I love mystery novels. I'm a huge Nancy Drew fan, so it was no doubt that I really enjoyed this. I mainly picked this one up because of J.K. Rowling's name, but there was one thing that really shocked me, and I think if I hadn't known that The Cuckoo's Calling was written by J.K. Rowling, I would have believed for sure 100% that this book was written by a man. We have scenes of uncomfortably detailed description of women's bodies and talking about breasts and so on and so forth, to the point where I was definitely uncomfortable. And I think that is an asset, I think that speaks to J.K. Rowling's talent as a writer, that she can change her entire personality and existence to be a completely different person through her writing style. And that speaks volumes about how talented she is at writing. I denounced this book as having a lot of elements that were definitely creepy, but I've let that go because I think there was an intention with hiding her identity that played into why she made those decisions to include those elements in that book. And although I don't exactly agree with the choice that she needed to include that, she did, and it really masked the fact that she wasn't a male writer. So I think that's quite an exceptional part to her book, to The Cuckoo's Calling, and if you choose to read that book, I think that's something that you should keep in mind as you read the book, because it makes it significantly more interesting to see how exactly she does her writing. The next book that I read was The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I gave this a 2.7 to 3 stars out of 5. I read this one in audiobook. I actually even read The Cuckoo's Calling in audiobook, but I forgot to mention that. And I do have a physical copy, so I kind of read it here and there in both mediums, and that, I think, gave this book a different experience to read. So the next book that I read in July was The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I gave this a 2.73 stars, I'd say, and it isn't the most exceptional of books. I expected actually quite a lot based on the hype that I've seen around it. I wasn't exactly let down, but it just didn't live up to it. So this book follows our main character, Leah, who's a princess, and it opens up on her wedding day, where she's betrothed to a king/prince she's never met before. So she decides to run away, and along with her, she takes important documents to the country. So of course, she's being hunted down by several people. This book is told from 3 perspectives: Princess Leah, the prince, who she was betrothed to, and an assassin that's been set out to kill her. And the interesting part of this novel is that for a significant part of the book, you're not supposed to know who's the prince and who's the assassin. But I have to say, I actually figured it out not that far into the book, because if you keep track of the characteristics, details, and interactions, you can tell who's who. So I think that ruined the mystery of it for me, but I enjoyed the book nonetheless. The romance was definitely very typical of YA fantasy novels, but I enjoyed it. I think reading it in audiobook actually helped the experience. What changed between audiobooking and actually reading the text was that Leah's character was significantly less annoying in audiobook. The voice actress did a fantastic job of adding an emotive quality to her reading, as opposed to being monotone and delivering dialogue without emotion. There was a lot of character, and I think I felt that more in the audiobook as opposed to simply just reading the text in my head and imagining her as a fickle teenager. So I think the audiobook definitely helped my experience in reading The Kiss of Deception, and I would say I enjoyed it fairly well enough. Definitely going to read the next 2 books though. As much as the characters and the romance wasn't all that interesting, the plot did take off after a certain point, and I'm pretty intrigued about where it's going. So the next books that I read in July were books 2 through 5 in the Septimus Heap series, which is Flight, Physic, Quest, and Siren. And I read all of these in audiobook. The first book, Magic, I read about 2 years ago, and I finally decided to finish the series now, which I think was a good enough decision. They were quite enjoyable to read. A quick summary is this book series is about a young boy named Septimus Heap who is the seventh son of the seventh son and prophesies to be a powerful magician. The first book opens up on the day that Septimus Heap was born. He gets kidnapped and is presumed dead due to political turmoil in the world. The queen and princess of their little kingdom get assassinated, and there's just general chaos as an evil magician decides to take over this kingdom. The Heaps also happen to stumble upon a young baby girl who gets abandoned, and so they decide to adopt her into the family after they lost their seventh child. The story picks up 11 years later with the young girl that they adopted, Jenna, and proceeds from there. And as you assume, this series is named after Septimus Heap, so of course he plays a huge part in the story. I just won't explain how because that's the entire plot of the first book. So this is a middle grade series, and it was fairly enjoyable to read. There were about 2 or 3 parts in this book that really annoyed me. A couple of homophobic lines and one character that was a huge stereotype, and that pissed me off, but the rest of the series overall had a genuinely good message and was fun to read. I actually have done a full review of aspects of the book that I thought were significant for me to talk about in a separate video. It's actually the last video I posted, and so I'll link it down below. Go and watch it if you want to know more about this. So the next 2 books that I read in July were The Wrath and Dawn and The Rose and the Dagger by Renee Ahdieh. I read these 2 back-to-back in hard copy. So this duology is a fantasy retelling of the origin story of 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights. It's about a woman named Shahrazad who tells one story every night to the king so that she doesn't get killed the next morning. Of course, that's the very baseline story of the origin of 1001 Nights. This duology delves deeper into, and definitely diverges from the original story, but it delves deeper into why this king, this boy prince, was killing off all of these women that he'd married. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great to see one of these childhood stories come to life in YA fantasy and become so beloved to so many people. It's one of the stories that I grew up with, so it was great to see. There are reviews and people who talk about certain elements of sexual assault and rape excuse that are in the book, and I didn't see any of that. I'm not going to discount their claims because, yes, there were triggering elements in this book, and certain scenes could definitely be read in that light. I'm not going to say no to that. Those exist. But the book definitely does a good job of explaining this violence. Definitely does not, at least in my reading, excuse rape. I'm gonna say this, there's one particular scene where Shahrazad is described to, kind of detach emotionally from consummation of the marriage, and yeah, I can see how that can be read as rape, but her character, at least at that point in time, is trying to play into this idea of a temptress to get information, and so it was intentional, but she still hates the guy, so very arbitrary in its nature, and understandably it could give the wrong impression. It's just very complex in its nature, so if you take it as something harmful, then I understand. Overall, it was a great series, though. I think I gave both of these books 4.5 or 5 stars out of 5. So I really enjoyed it. So the last book that I read in July was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And this one I also read in audiobook, even though I do have a hard copy. It was just a little slow to read in hard copy, so I decided to opt for an audiobook, and that definitely helped. A Song of Achilles is, I think, a retelling of the Iliad. I wouldn't say it's a retelling because it's literally the Iliad. Names aren't changed, nothing different happens. It's exactly what happens in the Iliad, except for it is told from the perspective of Patroclus, who is the lover of Achilles. And of course the entire story of the battle for Troy happens. And it's, I think, very true to the actual Iliad. It was great to see this very gay romance between Patroclus and Achilles. It was beautiful and touching and tore my internal organs out with how much pain this book caused me. Ooh, it was a great read. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars just because it got a little bit slow in the middle, but then again, the Battle for Troy was 10 years long, so you wouldn't really expect anything else from a book that talks about a 10-year battle. I just really enjoyed it. So that concludes my July wrap-up. I actually really enjoyed almost every single book that I read that month, and it was fantastic to have read 11 books in 1 month. Like, that is an actual record for me. I was super proud of myself. So that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!